Station 51, engine 27, engine 32, truck 105.
You're listening to The Fire Break with Steve Wolf. Welcome back to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing innovative real-world technologies for knocking down fire, which we're really excited about. Check us out on the web, teamwildfire.com. Equally exciting, though, and one of the reasons people go to their screens more often than to check on where the local fire is to play video games, right? And that's a massive market. If you look at the numbers, it dwarfs the film industry in terms of revenue. And I have got Eamonn Glass with us today, who is making, I think, what's going to be the best game ever, and it's called Fire. And Eamonn is using his background. He was with the EA, known as Electronic Arts. They made FIFA, they made The Sims, they made Madden, and now he's got his own company called Maggie's Farm, which is making Fire. And so Maggie's Farm and Fire are going to be way more famous than those other companies and games that we mentioned, because you actually get to put out wildfires and learn real world skills for how fires actually put out through gameplay. So fascinating work. Welcome to the show. How are you today, Eamonn?
I'm fantastic, Steve. Thank you for having me.
All right. So what gave you the idea to create a game about wildfire, which you're calling Fire, but I think we're going to call it Team Wildfire in the future. But that's my bias. What's the genesis of this?
I'll just first take a second to give a little bit of context for the name of our studio.
Yeah.
The name of the studio
Farm,
is a tribute to the Bob Dylan song Maggie's Farm.
Yep.
A nod to Dylan's incredible ability to reinvent himself over the years.
Okay.
More specifically, it's actually a tribute to the Rage Against the Machine cover of the Bob Dylan song. And the one thing I wanted to touch on, Steve, is a little bit of a disclaimer. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. I'm often kind of anxious and nervous in these things, but want to add a disclaimer that a bit of context that my father was a World War II veteran, and he instilled in me this belief system that holds immense reverence for soldiers willing to fight a war, but significant reservations for the people that start them. And over the past couple of years, I've gone on this incredible learning journey. I'll touch on the inspiration for that, but immersing myself in the study of wildfires. But I came to see firefighters at a sort of new greatest generation, and people that are willing to put their lives and the safety of themselves on the line for people in places unknown to them, which I think is a quality we've lost a bit in society in general. So with that disclaimer, if I say anything that offends any of your listeners, I assure you it's out of...
I mean, look, neither
ignorance.
of us are doing our jobs properly if we don't say something that offends someone, because what could you possibly say that someone doesn't take offense to?
Maybe in today's world.
Take a point of view, and that's fine. And I completely agree with you on, that hate the war, love the soldier.
Yes.
It's right. And that firefighters, you could say the same thing, right? Love the firefighter, hate the person who started the fire.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of feeling like that collectively we are all responsible for the level of wildfire on the planet through our consumption choices and our energy sources and whatnot. So plenty of blame to go around, but I think, what we're looking for right now is like, what's the part of the problem that we can actually address at an individual level, right? I can't stop. Well, I was going to say I can't stop everyone from using combustion engine cars, but neither can I stop myself from doing it. So there's plenty of attribution to go around there. But once fires start, then the people who jump in to put them out, they are darn heroic characters.
Yeah, agreed.
And I guess initially from the fantasy standpoint, wanting to play the part of a firefighter responsible for saving a community sounds like a pretty appealing proposal. within a game framework.
Yeah, I think that, many people have had the firefighter fantasy, but yeah, if I say anything that offends listeners, because I've got a perspective on this that's very much
Yeah, go ahead.
driven
Let's
fantasy.
jump right into that, Eamon. Then, what's your most offensive position? And
That
we'll
I
get that out of the way, and then you can go on to the rest.
I think that sending men and women out into the bush to fight fire with medieval weapons is a dated concept, and that we as a society have
100%.
many opportunities to evolve and improve and keep people more safe, and imagine a future where we can keep people more safe. And we want to do that in our video game.
That's right. This is much like saying, I want to introduce EVs to the market, and someone says, but my job is putting oil filters on cars. Like, I'm sorry, but the times are changing.
So I think in terms of your original question,
Yeah.
That notion of the inspiration for us, I fell in love with the video games at a very young age, Steve. At the beginning of the industry, I've been making games for 20 years. And most recently, as you said, I've spent over a decade at EA, and I got to work with incredible people on some of the most recognizable brands in the galaxy. As a young boy, my father took me to see the original Star Wars film in the movie theater. I was falling through the cracks in the movie theater in the chairs. And if you had said to that young boy that later on in life I'm going to work on Star Wars video games, I wouldn't have believed you. I've had a career that was a dream come true. But a couple of years ago, I had a life experience that inspired me to think bigger about the impact that I can have in the world as a person. And its origin was from a little town in BC called Lytton that our family's been camping at for 2 decades. It's a small town, but it was a community hub for a much wider region. And our youngest daughter learned to play chess in the town square there. And, as a gamer dad, chess is a rite of passage in our family. So those moments are special for us.
Right.
And tragically, in 2021, Lytton was burned to the ground by wildfires in less than 2 hours. And in 2023, we returned. We had stayed away because we didn't want to be in the way or gawking at people's misery. And, I stared at this spot where my daughter had learned to play chess, and this just nothing left of this town, just concrete foundations. And I had this sense of loss. But then I started to think about all the families that lost everything.
Yeah.
And that became kind of more the sense of selfishness. And then I thought about the lives lost in that area, whether it was people or animals. And, over the years, Steve, I've traveled to some fresh war zones in my life, and I can comprehend the mechanics of war. I've made games that are about war fighting. I've played them, and I couldn't comprehend the mechanics of fire that could destroy a town in a matter of a couple of hours. And it had a profound effect on me. And so I immersed myself into the study of wildfires and stayed in that immersion for months. And what fascinated me, pretty quickly in that study, was that fire is the only force of nature that we fight back against. And when we battle wildfires at large scale, it's a combined arms operation where we've got air, armor, infantry, and increasingly advanced technology assets that we bring to bear in what I call a collective action against an existential threat. And I have been making games that people love to play, combined arms games. And, we've had the luck to make some games that people play for decades. I started years ago working on a game called Project Reality that 20 years later, after winning a bunch of awards, still has an active player population. And those kind of things don't happen too often in the gaming industry, that a game keeps people's attention for 20 years. One of our co-founders, we met on that project, and I went on to a career at EA. He went on to form an indie studio, and I helped him set that up. And they went on to make a game called Squad. Squad is one of the most successful indie games of all time. It's a tactical war game, and it was considered the spiritual successor to Project Reality. And so we've got this background in making combined arms games that people play for decades, but that moment in Lytton, standing there and then having that just unable to get out of my head, made me think of this perspective of, what if we made really great combined arms games where you win by saving, where instead of, kill 1,000 soldiers, blow up 300 tanks, it is save 1 million hectares of forest, rescue 1,000 bears, that kind of thing. So shortly after that visit to Lytton, we started to work on what eventually became Fire.
Well, that's an origin story that gives you a why, and as a long practitioner of entrepreneurship and student of it, the companies that make it across the finish line are the ones where the founders have the strongest why you get out of bed every day to do this, and why you can't not do it. And so, having that why in your court, that's a huge piece of artillery towards your success.
I think that entrepreneurship journey has its ups and downs, and for me, that resiliency that's required in entrepreneurship, I've had to draw on that why a lot. And the more I see wildfires impacting the world, the more motivated and inspired I am to say we can contribute to this with video games.
So the idea really then is that while most people have kind of a amorphous idea of what happens in wildfire suppression or containment efforts, people who play this game would have a, I guess we're not going to call it a first-person shooter, but a first-person firefighter experience where they're going to learn the real-world tactics and methods by which wildfires are suppressed. And when I say real-world, I mean technology that exists today and technology that's coming on board through the works of firepreneurs or pyropreneurs.
Great, I love that. Firepreneurs,
around the world, because there's a lot of just the way you're looking at this and saying, we're not going to get a handle on wildfires until more people care about wildfire. And what better way to get people to care about it than engaging in it through this firsthand virtual experience? There's a lot of other people looking at this and saying, I'm looking at what's going on in the world right now, and it's not cutting it. And we're using medieval gardening tools to go after a multi-billion-dollar threat. How can we do this better? And there's conferences like Red Sky Summit that Bill Clerico and Convective Capital put on in San Francisco, and people come together, and you see that there's some really, really brilliant people working on the wildfire problem, in methods that are hundreds of years ahead of current technology, which means they're current technology, right? Versus the antique technology that's often used. And when I disparage the technology that I see out there, I'll join you in saying this has nothing to do with the people who are using it. People are using the absolute best technology that their agencies are willing to purchase, but that's often just not, it's not modern tech, and it leaves a lot of room. So in your game, people will be able to fight fire with, anti-ionizing guns or jet engine rigs or, satellite intel or, all of the fire behavior predictive technologies that are just coming on board in the real world, but will be native to the game. Is that?
Yeah. And pretty insightful for someone that hasn't played our game. So, I'll tell you a little bit about the game. So it is, you mentioned first person there. In the gaming world, there are really kind of specific definitions. Ours is a third person game.
Okay.
And we may have some.
And what does that mean? What does that actually mean?
There's a differentiating there where as a first person game, I'm seeing through the eyes of the firefighter.
Okay.
In a third person game, I'm seeing from a camera positioned behind the firefighter character.
Okay.
And so there's lots of
So you're
first person
seeing yourself
there.
essentially.
Yeah.
It's
And there's a variety of reasons why you make those choices from a design perspective, but that is a choice that we made early on.
okay.
There may be some modality switch. So if I'm operating an aircraft, that's often more immersive to do from a first person cockpit type view, aircraft or helicopter. But from a, character perspective, it's a third person game.
Okay.
And in terms of just, how we kind of came into this, it's, I think relevant to establish that our founder's journey here has been quite different than many other game studios. So a lot of small studios start with this brilliant idea for a game. And we didn't start that way. Ours was inspired by this tragedy in Lytton that we said, okay, our founder's quest began with this notion of how can we take our passion for video games and have a positive impact on the wildfire crisis. So we did a ton of different pivoting and iterating and learning and experimented with a bunch of different things, but eventually landed on the game we call Fire. And that's a combined arms game set on a near future Earth where players battle apocalyptic wildfires with their crew of up to 5 players. And if you look at, Fire today, when you see footage of wildfires, I mean, it looks apocalyptic.
Absolutely.
A great book that I read by Vancouver author, nonfiction Pulitzer Prize nominated book called Fire Weather.
Yeah, brilliant.
One of the things that
John
just,
Valence.
yeah. One of the things that stuck in my head about that was that he said that after a period of time of interviewing people from the wildfire in Fort McMurray, which is one of the largest ever to occur in the world at the time, I believe, that he came to see the people he was interviewing as time travelers who'd seen the end of the world and had come back to tell us about it. And I thought, like, wow, what a crazy way to depict that. But when it's 10 o'clock in the morning and the skies are black and baseball-sized embers are slamming into your car when you're trying to evacuate, I can't imagine that's anything but the end of the world as far as your experience is concerned. So we, landed on this combination of this combined arms game. We iterated and built some stuff. I'm a really big believer in co-developing with a community of people, players, stakeholders. And so the earliest testing that we had of this, when we kind of got the formula right, is that we had playtesters come back and tell us that Fire was like Helldivers 2 mixed with Power Wash Simulator. Some of your folks may not understand what those games are. They're both very successful, but very different games. So we think we have the ingredients for this kind of peanut butter and chocolate recipe in the gaming context. And our game is deliberately designed to amplify teamwork. That's our pedigree. When I was working on tactical war games with military advisors, they would often want to go really deep into realism, but I felt that the thing that we could focus on the most was architecting systems to create this sense of camaraderie amongst players and this notion of a kind of band of brothers and sisters. And we've had games that still people say there are no better games for teamwork than these games, where a group of random people in, squads of 8 or 9 all of a sudden become inspired and motivated to take the same objective and to behave as a cohesive team unit. So that's a really big part of what we want to focus on, more than, say, a hyper-realistic representation, because we've set it in the future to give us a canvas to allow more interesting things than cutting line for several hours, which won't be very commercially successful.
Right.
So there are 5 classes of specialists in the game where everybody's got a job to do. There's a crew chief, an assault class, a medic, an engineer, and a pilot role. And you can guess what those do based on the names. But the goal is that everybody in the crew has a job to do, and that working together as a team will produce results greater than the individual parts of a team. And you're equipped with military weapons that are adapted to fight wildfires. There's a bunch of other technology in there, but think of, an electric powered minigun and rocket launchers, military equivalent of an AT-4 disposable rocket launcher, but that they're delivering a fire suppressing payload. And some of the inspiration for that came from, one of the things that I saw was, I think it's 2018, the Swedish Air Force drops laser guided bombs on a wildfire with the theory that the concussion of the explosion would suck the oxygen out of that fire triangle, or I think I've seen you refer to it as a tetrahedron, that would be successful in suppressing the wildfire. And it worked. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I mean, let's take this and keep going down this angle and see where we can make a gaming experience out of that. We know that things like, prescribed fire, cultural burning, those are critical elements. So, we know that drip torches are a big part of that. But, for us, we've invented a fictitious weapon that we call a bloom thrower, but basically it's a flamethrower that I can also toggle the ammo supply into suppressant or retardant, depending upon how I've configured my loadout. And
as it should be in real world, right?
Yeah. And it's, from a backpack with highly compressed materials in there. So, I can go through and, like in video games, I mean, flamethrowers are always fun. So, I can go through and be really aggressive at the pacing with which I can do fire break building with this weapon. And then I can toggle the ammo supply and say, hey, we got a couple of spot fires here. Let's hit those. And, you work together as a team to move that really rapidly. And again, the game's not just about building fire breaks, but that's an example. Aerial is a super critical element. So you'll be able to call in tactical strikes from VLATs, very large air tankers. We're going to have some player controlled aircraft, but some will not be, because they just wouldn't be that exciting to do one mission of a VLAT drop. But we might take some of those concepts and say, well, okay, how about we have in-air rearming? So that VLAT doesn't need to go to an airfield hundreds of miles away. We, can hook up to an in-air fuel tanker, but recharge its suppressant.
Mid-flight refueling with retardant rather than just fuel.
And can we do that in 10 years in the real world? Because that downtime of those things is substantial.
Can we do that now?
Agreed.
Yeah.
And so, those are some examples of things to poke at that, okay, that's science fiction, but it's plausible. And we want to, ride that line.
I mean, Eamon, this is science fiction when Dick Tracy wore it. And there's a good chance if Dick Tracy hadn't had the communicator watch, I wouldn't have one either. So there's a very strong correlation between what happens in the fiction, imaginary / game world, and then how that inspires scientists. And NASA is even recognizing this by having on staff now, fiction writers, so that they can envision what the future is going to look like and then turn that over to the scientists to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, I don't attribute Steve Jobs with inventing the iPad. I attribute that to Gene Roddenberry, and Spock was using an iPad in one of my favorite TV shows. So I think there's that kind of action sense that we've talked about there, but we also know that logistics management is a really critical part of wildland fire operations, and in the games that we've made in the past, logistics management is critical. I know it sounds a bit odd, but in the games that we've made, you will find people that say, hey, all I do is derive supply trucks. And we're making a little smaller game, but there will be a logistical layer to that you'll need to plan. Like, hey, I'm going to need supply over here. And so we need to call in a supply drop and make sure that that's there. You'll be able to place what we call a forward operating base. That's a kind of a military term, but that will give your team substantial benefits. And, we'll have a Sky Crane helicopter come in and drop this mobile command post. In terms of scale within the game, currently we can simulate about 200 acre fires in our prototype. And we're aiming to create 1,000 acre fires. We're working on that right now. And we want to get to 4,000 acre incident areas.
Okay.
And then if we can figure it out, we want to see, can we link multiple incident areas together? So when I say if we figure it out, the reality of games is that they're driven by budget and iterating and learning with your player community. So there's lots of stuff that we have open-ended because we want to continue to, the first casualty of many projects is the plan. So The plan for us is to co-develop and iterate with a community of players, firefighters, fire scientists. If you check out the video game, the playtest highlights on our website at thisgameisfire.com, you'll see that there is some fantasy elements in there. Things like fire demons, spirit creatures, mythological beasts. That was a deliberate choice, informed by early playtesting. So we're driven by some business and audience goals, and we want to make a game that we can be passionate about, but that's going to have a positive impact on the wildfire crisis. So we want to achieve mainstream commercial success. And by creating this sort of canvas where we can personify fire as demons or spirit creatures and mythological beasts, it gives us a way better opportunity to create things that will be mass appeal, but also to personify fire as a force of destruction and a force of creation, which we want to make sure we ride that careful line that fire is a critical part of our planet's ecosystem. And then from a mythological perspective, encountering like Sasquatch in North America is something that, wildland firefighters will joke about, but we want to have a little bit of fun with that, but also bring some cultural learning into that, because as we expand the game around the globe, we'll be able to integrate mythologies from the regions around the world. There is, a careful note for us that we're not building a fire simulation. When we originally did that, it was overwhelming for 4 or 5 players. So we had to, kind of gamify it a bit. But the fire engine that we call it is modeled after some open source fire projects, as well as, a bunch of learning that we did about how fire propagates and spreads, and humidity and wind and other fuel sources that have informed how we build that fire system. We incorporate some indigenous themes that folks might see in the gameplay videos. There's a variety of reasons for that. But we really are critically grounded in this principle called nothing about us without us, which is to say that we work with a network of cultural advisors. On our team, we've got an indigenous art curator who's an amazingly talented artist. And we want to collaborate with indigenous communities for things around land stewardship, and using that notion of land stewardship in the context of indigenous cultures is much more interesting than doing it in some kind of arbitrary gameplay context. Sure. Game will release on PC and console. Our plan is to have a free playable demo in 2026. We have an E for everyone rating, which is the most family-friendly rating that you can get, which is our goal, is to make a game that kids of all ages can play. And it's built on top of a game engine called Unreal Engine that powers incredibly stunning games, including something that's kind of more of a cultural icon these days called Fortnite. That's a spiel on an overview of the game and some of the key aspects of it.
Okay. Well, I think there's games that are, strictly for entertainment, and then there's games that might confer a long-term benefit on you, depending on how realistic they are, to physics and to protocols and to equipment usage, etc. And I'm not sure that someone who was playing a war game would necessarily make a better soldier if they were drafted in real life. They might have some general sense of tactics or something they got from the game. But if I hear an announcement on an airplane, does anyone know how to fly this plane? There's been a problem in the cockpit. Probably someone who has got a few years on Flight Simulator is going to have a pretty significant advantage over someone who's never played that game. It's a simulation, not just a game, right? It happens to be entertainment because flying is fun. But you're really learning how to fly that plane, and the imagery that you see is actually the real airports that you'll be landing at, or cities that you'll be flying over. And so, you walk away with an actual practical knowledge, which is, not the same, but even pilots use simulators to expand the realm of experiences that their brain has undergone to make them better at their job. So I'm really excited about this idea that people who, people in the fire space as well, could play the game and come to some new realizations about fire modeling, fire propagation, fire suppression and containment strategies, community wildfire risk mitigation. And these things are all, not just in your game Fire, but even in the community, taking hold as the virtual and the real world collide more. One of the more successful community wildfire preparation plans is based on a simulation where people can visualize what would happen if they create fire breaks in their community, and then they can virtually light a fire and watch it go through the community and see what stands and what burns. And then they can go back in and they can rearrange the fire break positions and run the sim again until they've figured out exactly where the fire breaks need to be that would protect their community in real life. So I'm really fascinated about, what this is going to do for people's individual and collective understanding of fire management. And I think it's probably only through a game like Fire that most people would ever really have an impactful experience, in this space, because real fires happen in evacuated areas, right? We know there's a fire coming, we evacuate the area, so no one gets to stay there and actually learn firsthand, other than the firefighters, what the fire did in the community and what would have made a mitigating difference. But here in the game, you get to stay there on the fire line, in the fire, watch the fire behavior, compare what you did to how the fire progresses, and learn what works and what doesn't. So, I think, well, just because something's entertaining doesn't mean it can't be incredibly educational.
Yeah. And I think Zach, a couple things there. Our 15-year-old daughter, big part of helping shape this. And when we first got into it, I said, hey, we're going to make this amazingly fun game where we're also going to teach, kids about wildfire resilience. And she was like, cool story, bro, but you lost me at teach. And so
Exactly.
that, notion of learning, but wrapping it up in a compelling gaming experience, I think is a very valuable way of reaching new generations and new audiences, where it's not a classroom like teach experience. It's like, hey, goats are good at fuel reduction. Well, what is fuel reduction? So I think that's, an angle of it that inspires and motivates me to build a generation of more fire literate people, whatever their ages are.
Yep.
I think you touched on war fighting there, and war fighting is changing now. That the skills that I get in video games are actually incredibly relevant in modern battlefields. Drones are a big part of modern battlefield operations, as we've seen play out in some of the tragic conflicts around the world. And
they're not teaching how to prevent trench foot anymore when you walk through the marsh. Right?
Yeah.
Right. They're teaching how to operate the drone, which is something you could learn pretty well on a video game.
Yeah. And, can we help develop skills where I understand, drone carrying a bucket of water and how that behaves? And, those are things where we need to work to get to a degree of realism that the experience is challenging and immersive. But, that's very different than I need to fly this drone into this tank. So, for me, that notion of, hey, I can have just as much fun doing something that doesn't involve killing or destruction, I think is great. But then doing that in a combined arms setting where, okay, I've got this, heavy lift drone, it's carrying this bucket of water, but my four buddies are on the ground over here. So I need to think a bit about, like, where do I drop this? So, those are some of the things that I think in terms of, how warfighting is changing, how firefighting is changing, needs to come along and move with that the skills will be, I believe, relevant. Not that I can immediately go fight a fire, but that, I'm going to learn some things about how fire operations work and things of that nature, and maybe even get some skills that are directly relevant and applicable.
Yeah. So, of all of the tasks that one has to do, whether it be in war or in fire, how tell me about the lens through which you look at them. Here's the 100 things that a firefighter has to do in a day. Which of those lend well to a game and would be fun to play?
Um, but I think that, if you look at like just take military or actually let's stay with firefighting. So let's look at a structural or urban firefighter's life where a lot of it is waiting for a call and then
Rolling up hose.
going on the call and then the engagement with the incident. So we're obviously not going to include a huge amount of that, waiting for a call in a video game, but we will have some aspects of that. So in video game design, there are things that are synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous, I need people to do this with. Asynchronous, I could do this on my own. So we have that designed into our game because those make for very catchy and good loops for people to say, hey, I'm going to go over here and spend some time modifying and upgrading my weapons. Few minutes while I wait for my buddies to come online, and then cool, we're going to go and we're going to jump into a fire and battle a wildfire. So it's about having the right balance of the quote unquote boring parts that add richness to the gaming experience and context for it, but then really focusing on the exciting parts and in ways where you accelerate time. So a herd of goats taking 8 hours to clear an area, that's not going to be very fun. But having a Sikorsky helicopter drop a herd of goats that then goes and clears an area in 10 minutes while you're off doing something else and your dog is making sure that the goats are doing their job, then, okay, cool. You can have fun with that. And gamers love goats. So it's a, kind of a win-win situation there where,
Right.
we're looking at those opportunities to say what appeals to a gaming audience, what's relevant in the fire space, how do we bring that to life in a compelling and engaging entertainment experience? That's the kind of lens that we've applied to. Does that make sense?
How did goats come to prominence over sheep or emu or other animals that could have been popular?
Well, our studio logo is a goat, which is a happy accident. One of the most successful yet banal games of all time is called Goat Simulator. And goats are very effective at fuel mitigation. So, I mean, that's like the perfect combination there to inject into a video game
Right.
and make it fun and appealing to the audience, but also again, yeah, cool. Goats do fuel mitigation. Interesting. What's fuel? So those are the kind of lenses that we've taken: is find the things that work in a gaming context that bring with them richness about understanding fire.
So that must be a fascinating whiteboard in your office.
Yeah, an even more fascinating one in my head after I learn all this stuff. So many things in what's going on in fire when you look at like the thing in Los Angeles where you've got water bombers reloading off the Pacific Ocean, and you just look at that and go, that's going to make a great video game. But then you look at innovations in fire tech and you think, a sonic weapon that puts out fire, a jet engine powered weapon that puts out fire is like, well, that's going to make a great video game. So I think that there's so much to draw on that I absolutely love the possibilities.
Yeah, right. Does it ever create this "where do I start" feeling?
No, I think that I have enough experience to focus on where to navigate. Like definitely you kind of wander around when you're doing sort of discovery type processes, but once you kind of nail down the sort of core pillars, and for us that's guided by this idea that can a video game be Smokey the Bear for new audiences and new generations as a sort of like meta design pillar. But
Right.
then more tactically speaking, we've got design pillars that there's 5 of them that guide us, which is that nature is terrifyingly powerful. We don't need to fabricate nature as an engaging and incredibly compelling, let's call it, adversary in these contexts. Teamwork is rewarding. So that's a pillar for us that The design of everything needs to enhance teamwork. Heroes are everywhere. So as much as we say that you need to work as a team, we need to design the game that gives everybody the opportunity to be a hero. And then fire is both an enemy and an ally. And that, again, we'll have like, kind of mission building configurators where we'll let people kind of configure it in a sort of sandbox like way. But the default kind of experience will involve this idea that you may encounter a fire spirit creature that you can make an ally, and that fire spirit creature can help you. And then, kind of leaning further into that, the fifth pillar for us is that we favor culturally rich entertainment over scientific simulation. And that is not a mutually exclusive thing at all. Right. But those, kind of guide the decision making. And then there's the game design aspect, which is to say that my experience as a gamer and the core loop, we call it, and the mechanics that support that core loop need to be absolutely amazing to attract and retain people into a game like this.
Let me ask you about your personal workflow, information management. So your brain's an incredibly fertile place and you have all these ideas about this, what the game and the physics and the culture and what makes games successful and the pillars that you're in your own workflow. How do you manage, thought inventory? Do you, click up a yellow pad, an app that you like? How do you organize your thoughts onto paper so you can look at them and then reorganize them?
So we have a small team, but we've got a variety of different ways that we capture things in terms of like ideation. We use a tool for that where you can just stub out an idea. You can go, cool, I've got an idea here, and it goes into an idea backlog, and then you add a little bit of detail. So we try not to lose any of the ideas, but those things go into an idea backlog, and then we'll pull on those as we're able to get to them as they're relevant. But also because we're, working on some fairly complex stuff, we'll take systems, because it's a systems-driven game, which is different than other types of game designs, and we'll build out fairly detailed design documents for the systems. So we use Google Docs for that, just to, keep it simple and multi-user friendly. For example, our fire design doc is about a 30-page design document, and we're on our third iteration of a fire system, working on the fourth, that I probably think that we won't be happy with it until we're like fifth or sixth iteration of it. And in a lot of cases, we'll just like deprecate the design doc and start moving. But if we go back and say, let's refactor that, we'll do a new design doc. And then we feed those into a project management tool that breaks the work down. And we use a game-specific project management tool that helps us decompose it and break it down in a UI and context that's really easy to understand for game developers. So we've got a kind of a digital scratch pad through to detailed design documents, through to decomposition into work packages for people to execute on.
That's not your 2 a.m. go-to, right?
How do you mean by that?
When you wake up at 2 a.m. because this idea popped in your head. I'm hoping you're not jumping on Google Docs at that.
Oh, no. That's the scratch pad. And the scratch pad is super easy for us to contribute things into. We've tried a bunch of different tools, but the video game specific project management tool is really well optimized to create like super bite-sized things, because it knows that game makers wake up at 2 a.m. with, right, I got this great idea. So it's like bang, 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 bang. Cool. I'm just going to stub that out for now. And so that scratch pad is our 2 a.m. ideation tool.
Okay. Tell me about your social circle. It's very hard to work with people that you're equally passionate about the same topic and not become friends with them. Like that becomes your circle. How has your circle changed since since embarking on the mission to make a fire game, or to make the game Fire?
Well, as an entrepreneur, I would say, what is this social circle you speak of? So you know how
right. Who are the people you reach out to exchange ideas with, and with whom you feel a sense of camaraderie, even if you're not working with on a daily basis, because you know that at whatever place on the planet they are, they're working towards the same thing you're working towards. And now you
Yeah.
know these people and you have names to go with them, that you didn't before you were in the fire space.
I think for me that the most, kind of amazing experience is through the overall process is I've got a social circle of family and friends that I use for, personal well-being.
Sure.
But, my friends,
You're going to be one of these people that professes to have a work-life balance.
they are definitely more balanced than I am, but I'm pretty good at it. I'm old
Okay.
enough that, I don't work an hour in a day right now. I love what I do. So
Yep.
for me, it's more about managing self-care. Let's call it that, to make sure I get exercise, eat right, sleep well. But really all of that's optimized so that I can build this game that has a positive impact on society. So in terms of that social circle changing, I've, been able to meet a ton of really amazing people working in fire. And that is what has changed my social circle more than anything. I've got lots of connections and network in the gaming industry, but in the fire world, there's, for the most part, we're talking about people who've decided that working on something bigger than themselves or their mortgage is a calling for them, which is pretty amazing. In the gaming industry, it's amazing because you have a lot of people that are, I'm doing this because I love it. So it's really a great combination of, a network of people that love what they do and a network of people that has emerged through this that love the planet, let's put it that way, and are here to solve like much bigger problems than, something more self-centered. So that's been a shift that's been incredibly rewarding.
And on the other side, the unrewarding part, although we just have to deal with the world, as it comes. But you have a group of people that you're choosing to immerse yourself in. We're very concerned about the planet and fire's impact on the built environment, as well as fire's impact on the unbuilt environment, the managed or poorly managed or unmanaged environment. And then there's also now, the emergence of people who seem to openly not care about the environment, and are working on things that seem to be counter to the health of the planet. Do these groups die? Do you see that there's a place for dialogue with these groups so influence could move one way or the other, or do you think that each group is just going to do their own thing?
Whether you agree with how the world handled the COVID pandemic or not, and everything gets really polarized, but it did show that worldwide we're able to come together to do something. It seems like we need catastrophic inspiration to come together to do something. It also, we're in a society that a lot of things have become polarized and politicized. But you can't deny fire and its impact and its cost on lives and society and infrastructure. So whatever's causing it, and your belief systems around that isn't as important to me as that it's here, things are burning, and we need to educate people and become a more fire literate species and society so that, we can deal with this future that we've created for ourselves and our kids in a way that, hopefully comes to living with fire in a much healthier way than current. So whatever's behind those belief systems, the burning is real. And, we want to take a virtual representation of that burning and equip people with tools to, understand its origins and how to deal with it. I'd love to poke at a little bit about what we're doing around that notion of like, how are we impacting those social issues?
Yeah. What's your thought?
So we've got this, notion of this framework. I need things to be really simple. So it's ABC: awareness, behavior, change. So, we've got this idea that we can use video games as a vehicle to bring awareness to issues related to wildfire resiliency, mitigation, attack, and that we can then inform people of the behaviors that they should adopt in those contexts, and that then we can look at how those behaviors manifest in game. But what we want to achieve is a level of success that allows us to analyze the change of those behaviors in society and then extrapolate from that what impact did we have. So that notion of, building fire resiliency, I will, kind of poke at that because it might not come across in the description I gave about this sort of crazy action game. But in the world, in our game world, you are stationed at a fire base. That fire base is modeled after a smoke jumper base, and we're going to fictionalize some aspects of that. But currently, the one in my head is the Siskiyou base in Oregon, because there's a museum there that we'd love over time to build out in a virtual context. Video games are an amazing digital cultural distribution and preservation tool. So in that notion of, understanding fire resiliency, I've got my fire base. I need to manage that fire base. I need to make it more fire resilient, because doing so will give my ground crew better morale, which will then result in I get faster resupply missions because the ground crew is more motivated and inspired. So we can tie those things together to show that clearing out shrubbery is valuable. Clearing out trees that represent fire danger is valuable, but we can tie that into a progression system in the game so that when I unlock chainsaws, I will need to then go use those chainsaws to clear out fire danger trees. I'm learning chainsaws. I'm learning why I'm clearing these trees, and I'll improve my fire resiliency score. And then I'm going to get some in-game benefits. And that's just one kind of thread. But there's a lot of that we could do that goes beyond this kind of fantasy action game of, put out fires and drop bombs on them. It's like I need to be the steward of this piece of land I'm in charge of. And then does that create a situation where a kid comes home and tells their parents, or a kid tells their parents that, hey, some of the trees we have down the side of the house here, we should probably get rid of because I've learned that those are highly flammable as a species, and that the proximity of the house is really close. And then you got parents that are kind of like, well, I have to do what my kid tells me. And does that have a rippling and positive impacts in terms of, maybe some localized fire resiliency, but obviously we want to achieve that in the largest scale possible. And then around like mitigation, we've gamifying this obviously, but we've got like this 2-stage game mode design that where in the first stage you're building preparedness, and in the second stage you're attacking a wildfire. And so I might use Team Wildfire jet engines, and I'm going to say we're going to do evacuation route hardening there because that's something we have to do. And we'll take some license to that to say, well, that's not going to be very fun to drive this truck down the road while these jet engines blast out evacuation route hardening. So we'll make it an autonomously controlled vehicle. Cool. Deploy it there.
Right.
It's going to go down the road.
Which we're doing too, by the way.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Again, it's a canvas where the fact is more interesting than fiction. And then, there's so many cool things to draw on. But then, I'll do the fire preparation in phase 1 of the game modes, build fire breaks, set up defense systems, and then I will go into the second phase, which is the fire attack, and I'll understand the choices of what does a fire break do. We don't even need to be in that area there because the goats cleared it out. The evacuation route's cool, and there's vehicles moving back and forth getting civilians out of there. And so, learning some of those things, but again, wrapping it up in a context that's like, this is a hell of a good game is the goal. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a lot. Yeah.
I'll poke at something else there that coming at it from a game designer of war games, that I was surprised to learn that in today's connected, networked world, that we do not have GPS and status tracking for people and assets involved in a wildfire. And this idea that someone could get lost on a wildfire, to me, when I've got a, device here that could tell you everything about my current status, location, etc.
Right.
So in a game world, we need to do that status tracking because you're making up for lack of situational awareness aspects, and it makes the game easier to know where people are. But in wargaming, we adopted the NATO symbology. that describes like a tank is a tank, an infantry unit's an infantry unit. And so could we use our game as a vehicle to come up with a symbology for global fire operations that, not to say we would drive that standardization, but we could certainly pilot it and test it so that every asset, objective, and firefighter is tracked, and the symbology of that is relevant to real world fire operations. And so, that's an angle where I think we can contribute as an active contributor from a fire tech perspective, but then in a civilian literacy perspective around fire. I've watched the Watch Duty evolution for a while, and John Clark Mills seems to be an incredible human being and a very successful entrepreneur, who's devoted his life to this Watch Duty cause that was invaluable in the Los Angeles.
What an amazing app! We should just digress for 1 second to say, if you haven't downloaded the app called Watch Duty, you should.
It's a problem. Oh, sorry. Yeah, your audience should. For me, it's a problem because we don't have it in Canada, which drives me crazy.
Yeah, well, ask John.
Yeah. So
the eastern side of the United States is largely uncovered on Watch Duty. Yeah. But they have the ability, as they proved in Texas, to onboard a state, within days.
Yeah, so it's incredible.
It should be worldwide, really.
Agreed. And so that notion of let's take Watch Duty. In our game world, you're stationed at your fire base. There's a situation map. From that situation map, you deploy into fire operations. There's a variety of different operations that we'll have. But what we want to do is partner with Watch Duty to bring the language that they use, of the visual language. We'll gamify it a bit, but use that as the representation of the theater of operations, I'll call it, because I come from a military game design context, to where now we're teaching kids of all ages the language of disaster and catastrophe. So when they actually encounter that and say, hey, we should download this app because there was a catastrophe here, they'll understand some of it. And again, building a more fire literate society, things like that, integration of, what does that interface in the game look like? But John's done a lot of work to already solve that problem for us. At the same time, by leveraging that work, we can make a more fire and disaster literate society. And then if I, look at that, extrapolate that further from a STEM education perspective, well, candidly, I would love our video game to, be free for schools to use. We need to figure out the economic model behind that. But, can we make our game available to schools, and that's part of a STEM education, and that we would obviously need to adapt aspects of it to be specific to that, right. And optimize that, but that kids could have, competitions to see who builds the most fire resilient fire base the fastest. We could create a sort of, kind of esportsy like context that could appeal to elementary and middle school kids. Imagine if every kid in California had a couple hours, whatever it is, devoted to fire resiliency learning in the context of a video game, and then have insurance companies and other participants sponsor those and give prizes to the schools and the kids to help, feed the funding, where there is a measurable impact on building a fire literate society, where we then can measure, did that actually improve our resiliency towards fire or reduce some of the losses around that? So there's, tons of ways for me that I get super excited about that notion of taking these real world things, virtualizing them a game, but then feeding it back to real world impact.
Right. Right. At the age appropriate, duck and cover, which is how we prepared for, the Russians to nuke us. We practiced the duck and cover without really talking too much about what the realistic impact of, inbound nukes would do to us. Right. So we were, or when the kids line up for a fire drill in school, we don't have to show them how devastating a wildfire would be to the community. And if we did it would actually be counterproductive, because people would be so intimidated by the threat that they might be unable to act. So we focus the education on just, what's the performance part that we need to be able to do, and what's the trigger word for when to do it.
Yeah, I thought when you said duck and cover there, you might talk about school shootings, which
Oh,
seems
no, it's going back a little
yeah,
historically, back a little further.
yeah. So I think that those, examples of how to, have some kind of an impact on society around, let's say, framing up these quote unquote lessons, but in an engaging game context that can teach people about it. But then, we've talked a little bit about it here and there around wildfire innovation, integration. And
Yes.
again, that's where for me, and when I look at this stuff, I'm like, this is all incredibly great material for a video game. So I think I listened to one of your pods. I think it's Jeff Denham and
Yep. Yep.
Strongwater.
Yep.
And like he is just I found that particular episode of your pod incredibly inspiring. That he's a really, what an interesting cat, like what an incredible human
Yeah. Right.
being. And so that notion of like, okay, so in our game, can we develop a relationship with Jeff's company, and you can, call down a strong water mixer that you drop into your water supply and it mixes it. And, again, we're fictionalizing that, but we're, collaborating, bringing awareness to some of these alternatives in fire tech. We've got a partnership that we're establishing with Fireswarm, a BC-based company that is taking heavy lift drones and optimizing them for battling wildfires. Lots of people are working on that. They're near and dear to my heart because they're BC-based, but also they got into this because their family home burned down due to wildfires, and they left their jobs in marketing and aerospace and formed a company to go do this. And, again, video game context of that's a command asset that you can call in and a swarm of drones shows up. And some of them may be pilotable. We'll need to figure some of that out. But then your, venture of Team Wildfire, when I was, looking at this and stumbled across like these guys taking jet engines that can't be used to fly jets and using it to put out fires is like, okay, this has got to be in this video game. Like that's just an incredibly cool concept. And so, bringing these together starts to, show that, in my view, this high tech firefight with these like Tony Stark like equipped kind of boots on the ground,
Right.
Creates an incredibly cool canvas for great gaming experiences, and also pokes at this notion of, well, could we do this? Like, can we have, jet engines where we've got them deployed and drone swarms? And, I don't know that we would ever, have people making departmental purchasing decisions based on the way our game plays, but kind of bringing some of these things to life. And, I would love to have, it's a bit of a crazy idea, but like a virtual trade fair in our game world that's like, you can go and check out all this stuff in a gamified sense, because in the base manager role of this, there will be that element. Like I need to decide which of these things to buy. And so with industry partnerships, we could build something out like a virtualized trade fair in the game that I go and make. Okay, I've got 1,500 credits to spend. I'm going to buy one jet engine and one drone swarm.
Right.
So stuff like that starts to
There's
me.
definitely a purchase correlation there. In the U.S., I'm sure that certain firearms purchases are influenced by people's experiences with those guns in games.
Yeah, I think that, something that around like military context there is about 20 years ago, the U.S. military operated a game called America's Army. It was a free game. There was some kind of odd design decisions imposed by policy, I'll say, that the game wasn't great, but it was decent. But it was funded as a recruiting tool.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some studies done, and this is the kind of study that I'd like to see for us, that an MIT study found that game was more top of mind in the target recruit demographic than any other form, actually than all other forms of advertising that they had spent money on. So I don't know that it was, a critical tool in terms of boosting numbers, but it was effective in reaching the audience. And can a game like this have the same kind of impact, whether it's for awareness or recruiting or inspiring people to go into wildland fire or inspiring people to be entrepreneurs in wildland fire? There is, a ton of positive impact that I believe can come out of it.
Absolutely. Creating entertainment towards something, when the show Emergency came on the air in 1973,
I was addicted.
Right. There were like I literally cut school, in fifth grade so I could get home in time to watch that show. When that show went on the air, there were 4 fire medics in the world. When it went off the show, when it went off the air 3 years later, there were over 50,000 paramedics working in fire departments. So it's monumentally influential, taking the entertainment value of something that's exciting and positive, putting it in front of people. It absolutely influences career choices. I absolutely would not be here sitting here doing this today or running Team Wildfire if I hadn't, watched Emergency as a kid.
Yeah, that I noticed that you used the opening clip of that.
Yeah.
In your pod, that
that's my tribute to them.
Awesome.
G365. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Eamonn, it's been fascinating chatting with you. And I look forward to having you back on the show again as progress goes. If people want to get more information about the game, the development, and see what you're up to, what's the website?
This game is fire.com. Hopefully easy to remember. I really appreciate you having me on here. You've got a broad network of listeners, but because of that, there is one thing I just want to poke at that our biggest challenge as a venture is securing funding. And
Sure.
In the video game industry right now, it's an industry that, for a variety of reasons, is in a structural shift. There's been hundreds of thousands of layoffs, project cancellations, studio closures. And it's a great time to be making games because there's a talent surplus for the first time in the industry. But it's a very difficult time to access capital. And so if you've got folks out there that are listeners that are like, hey, I think there's some really, interesting possibilities that can come out of this, and they'd love to talk about, a relationship to help us achieve some of those goals, we'd love to talk. And again, you can find us at thisgameisfire.com, and there's an email link at the bottom. Those things come through to me, and love to talk in that context.
Absolutely.
And
just to help, not just to help you raise money for this valuable mission, but, if you want to own a piece of potentially the next most successful video game in the world, here's your opportunity. So reach out to Eamonn Glass. Eamonn, thank you so much. Again, the website is thisgameisfire.com. I have checked it out and personally impressed. Folks, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire. Check us out on the web, teamwildfire.com. Until I see you next time, have some fun, mitigate your property, do something valuable, and as Eamonn has suggested, strike a work-life balance. Good luck with that. I haven't done it yet, but I wish you the best with it. I'm Steve Wolf. You're listening to The Fire Break. Thanks again.